Joe. Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm really excited to talk about our topic today. As my wife would say, I don't really know a whole lot about hyperproductivity, so really interested to dig into it with Shad and his team and see how things are going. So we'll kick that off with some deeper introductions, if you will. So as Joe mentioned, I'm Tom Brooks. Been with Render for about 4 years, been in the industry for 16, background in GIS, specifically in telecom and fiber management system software, and obviously construction management as well. I'll hand off to Joey and we'll leave Shad for last since he's really the star of the show. So Joey?
Sure. Joey Hurley, Network Delivery Manager for Render. So I work with new clients and existing clients like Shad and their projects within Render. Been with Render for about a year. Prior to that, I've got 12 years experience as a contractor, working as a prime for clients in the Southeast United States, doing project management and then running operations.
Thanks. And Shad?
Yeah, so I'm Shad Siggers. I'm a OSP engineer with Strata Networks. I've been with Strata for about 9 years. And my background is previous to OSP Telecom is actually civil engineering. So got a couple degrees and a PE license in engineering and moved into telecom. So been a good ride.
Nice. Great. And Shad, while we've got the focus on you, why don't you tell us a little bit about Strata and the Lehigh City project that you're working?
Yeah, so Strata Networks is the company is a telecom and broadband service provider in the northeast part of Utah. So a rural service provider. And it really started as a bunch of farmers and ranchers wanted to get phone service back in the 1950s. So that's the roots of Strata. And over time it grew, and now Strata is the primary service provider in the rural communities around northeast Utah. So in Strata for the last 10 or so years has been fiber overbuilding their territory with fiber overbuilding the copper and coax legacy facilities that have been around for a long time. So Strata is, well versed in the telecom industry and has been around the block a little bit with building and managing and owning its own network.
And the Lehigh project, this represents a bit of a diversion from the business as usual that Strata Networks has been participating in. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you're right. It was a little bit of a, I would say, stretch for us, a good stretch. So yeah, let me kind of explain how this project, this private-public partnership came to be. So Lehigh is a suburban community, 20 minutes south of Salt Lake City. You may hear sometimes in the tech world of Silicon Mountains or Silicon Slopes. Yep. So Lehigh is in the heart of that. Not to be confused with Silicon Valley, obviously. But the Utah tech sector, Lehigh is right in the middle of it. And it is, geographically a fair distance from where we're headquartered at.
Yeah, over about 2.5 hours, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's over a 2-hour drive on the highways to get here. So back in 2021, Lehigh submitted out an RFP looking to provide better broadband services across their city. So they recognized that the services that were being provided were not adequate for their citizens, so they submitted out an RFP to try to find a solution to provide better services to their community. So Strata and many others responded to the RFP, and our response, was to put together this public-private partnership to build a fiber network for Lehigh. Obviously, that was accepted because we're right in the middle of it right now. But that's kind of how the partnership was formed. The project itself, I mean, some of the details of the project, it's to provide fiber to the prem for around 21,000 locations within Lehigh city limits. So, and the project is an open access network. Neither Strata nor Lehigh City are service providers on the network. So the city has agreements with 5 service providers right now that are actively providing service on the network.
Great.
So
and Strata's, I mean, this is obviously not your first rodeo. You guys are no strangers to construction. You've from what I've known of you and working with you in the past, I mean, you've kind of had to be somewhat self-reliant from a construction standpoint historically. So you know quite a bit about how it's done. Now, have you done it over 2 hours away from your home office and warehouses and all that? Maybe not. So, you know, in thinking about that and thinking about the challenges that you had to solve for, what I wanted to do was really kind of start with some kind of high-level themes initially and talk about those, and then we'll kind of dig into some of the specifics. We'll get Joey involved in the conversation, we'll start with, you know, really just identifying the right partners, right? So this is obviously kind of a key thing to solve for, since, you know, as we mentioned, this is not exactly business as usual. You guys are, you know, a little far from home and having to manage to a specific timeline to keep a customer happy. So tell us a little bit about the partnerships and how you formed those and what you were shooting for.
Yeah, so the project, as you mentioned, is, you know, it's a distance from our home territory, but we've had good partners and relationships in the telecom industry, you know, from material suppliers to contractors, engineers, whoever, that we rely on as a team, as a partnership. But this project created some challenges for us. One is the scale of it is, for a rural telecom provider, is pretty large. And just the duration of the project, the initial design and build portion of the project was, you know, it's fast track. So it's fast schedule, which creates some logistical challenges. So we knew going into it that we had to leverage our existing partnerships and look at efficiencies and likely create new ones, right? New partnerships with, and it's really, for us, it's for a project like this and coming together on solving all the issues and creating the product that we need to provide to the city. It was real important for us to, whatever existing relationships and partners we have and new ones, that we have like-minded people that understand the vision and to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Right. Yeah, and that you know, those partnerships run from, you know, obviously your software vendors, and thank you for allowing us to be one of them. But, you know, also your contractors as well, the folks actually doing the work out in the field and managing that. So one of the big things to navigate there, obviously, there are the labor and workforce challenges. We know there's so many folks that are building out broadband all across the U.S. right now, and that's set to probably just increase as funding starts flowing through. And so it's harder and harder to find, contractors and markets. And so, what was, your approach there and your thoughts on who you were working with and how you would work with them?
Yeah. I mean, there's, the contractor aspect of it is one of the challenges. I think one of the things that if you think when we, 2021, there was a material challenge that was a big challenge at the time, and labor shortage on the construction side is certainly another challenge that started there and has continued. One of the things we've tried to do is just develop systems and processes that utilize efficiency and having partnerships with that vision of how to accomplish the tasks and project at hand. So, and then working and discussing with, new partners and new partnerships on how it can be best accomplished. Right. So obviously it takes manpower to complete things, but if everybody can come together on the efficiencies to make it happen, it works better for everybody. Yeah.
And some of those efficiencies, we'll obviously dig into more of the specifics later on, but at a high level, how are you utilizing, your tools now to make sure that you're being the most efficient with your use of the labor that is in market?
Yeah, so with this project, we kind of revamped some of the systems and workflows. I wouldn't say taken traditional systems and workflows and construction methodologies and dumped them on their head. That's not what we set out to do, but it was more just, what can we do better, right? What can we be more efficient of? And how can we provide more tools and more things, better things to help everybody?
Yep.
And so that in itself allows a little more adaptability, I guess, for the project to be able for partners, contractors, design consultants, whoever, to be a little more agile with the needs of the project and to be able to move and adjust accordingly.
Right. Yeah, and obviously one of the keys to doing that is really kind of shifting from that traditional paper-based workflow or even PDF-based workflow to a digital workflow. Tell us about the decision to go digital, meaning, digital in the office, digital in the field, and how that has gone for you.
Yeah, so that, as over the years, I think, anybody who's done construction, any type of construction, recognizes the traditional design, bid, build, or design, build workflow, right? It's a design mechanism that puts information on paper that then is handed to the design team then hands it to a contractor that then the workflow to install or put together that construction work. And obviously there's QC kind of mechanisms in there with inspectors and project managers, construction managers to ensure the quality's there, that it meets the design and the specifications and everything of the project. And then, it's built and approved according to plans and paper prints.
Right.
And then once the design's complete, right, or whatever field changes or red lines as they're termed are then put back on paper prints and then turn over as a completed record document to whomever. A lot of times it's back to the design team. And then those records and as-built are then transferred to a records management system. So that design workflow, right, it's on a fast schedule, large-scale project has some inefficiencies that make it difficult. A couple of just, examples, one being that final completion of taking paper prints and putting them into a records management system. That's brutal, because you're literally taking lines on a paper and putting them into a software system.
Right.
So that's an example. Not to mention when you have a project that requires many construction teams and crews having full visibility of work, where it's being allocated, how it's being allocated, real-time information. Paper prints and traditional methodology has some challenges and inefficiencies.
Right.
just by nature.
Yeah, and so this would probably be as good a time as any to really kind of talk about, what Render brings to that equation and how we solve for that. And just to give everyone a little bit of background, obviously Render is in digital construction management, and those traditional paper-based PDF flows that Shad's kind of talking to. We generally come in where paper would enter that flow. And so we provide a digital bridge between that initial design and the digital as-built and the fiber management system downstream, so that the work is never divorced from the geospatial nature of the design. That enables not only crews to be able to make red line changes in the field so they don't have to be redrawn or kind of play detective with once they get back into the office, but also enables really efficient management of who's doing what and where, all stemming from that design. So maybe this might be a good time to hand over to you, Joey, and kind of explain a bit about how Render does that. How do we provide that visualization in terms of what work is ready and where?
Sure. So, from a high level, the way we kind of do it is we take engineering designs from, Shad and his team, and, through a process, we come up with, some requirements and a methodology of breaking down an engineering design into tasks and work, that makes sense for the crews in the field. We want to make sure that, the appropriate work's given to the appropriate crew at the appropriate time, so that, people are being utilized as efficiently as possible as they go through the process. So we'll take a set of designs, from Strata, run them through what we call blueprinting process, and then, visualize them or, load them into Render for the crews to use. And then it's there for Strata's team to allocate, to their resources, as they see fit. They can say, hey, this cabinet's really hot right now. The city wants to turn up this neighborhood first or this neighborhood second. Even though that may not be how the designs, made it through engineering. But once we get it in there, there's a lot of room for, I think, Shad said earlier, agility in your construction management process. So you can say, hey, we've got this in here. While these crews are finishing up this week, we're going to allocate all this over to this crew so they can get started over there. And you can really see, how they, progress through the work. You can see, within Render on your map. And really what I love about it, coming from a construction background, is anytime we had a big project, we'd print out every single paper print, on 11 by 17, and we'd find the biggest wall we had in our warehouse, or we'd build, a big, just a big display board, and we'd tape it all up there. And then it would be someone's job, construction manager or project manager or something, to go in there with a highlighter every day and, highlight the progress. And that was kind of our, that was our record of progress. Our phone company clients would come in and they'd want to look at our board. I'd come in, want to look at the board. The crews would want to look at the board. But the great thing about what we do now, and, getting these designs and keeping them alive in Render, but having that live data, everybody has access to this board. It's live, the data is good because it's, it's up to date. You don't, worry about, Steve being out for a week to be on vacation and nothing getting updated, and now, it'll never be right again. So, there's a lot of, interesting things within there that, as we get that design from Strata, put it into Render, and then they can, manage it, allocate it, and see it, work through its workflow with their crews. It's really exciting to see.
Yeah, and I often refer to that blueprinting process you talk about as really kind of breaking the design down into the individual Lego blocks that were required to build that network. But instead of just being Lego blocks, every Lego is labeled for, exactly what it is, where it needs to go, and at what point in the process it needs to be installed. And so with that, and with that blueprinting process, we create dependencies among those tasks. Tell us a little bit about how that adds to that efficiency, Joey.
Yeah, so, and that I'm kind of a nerd for this stuff. It's spending too much time in the industry, and banging my head against the wall with these problems. But, as a contractor, one of the things you hate is sending guys out to do work that's not ready yet. You're paying for all that windshield time. The great thing about Render, which I think you can see in the slides right here, is, we've broken down kind of the task or, life cycle into, certain areas. So once a task gets blueprinted into Render, it's there and it's ready, to be allocated and start its way through the life cycle. Gets allocated to a crew or, maybe to a contractor, then they release it to a crew. Work may not be releasable yet. You may have all the splicing designs in Render, but there's no fiber there. So you don't want to give that out to an individual splicer for him to have on his iPad and have that work constantly there. For him to maybe accidentally drive out, to a handhole or to a pole or something to go do splicing, and there be no fiber there for him to do splicing. That's a waste of that guy's afternoon. And that's one of the great things about what we do in Render is, through the design and, really going through the details with, Strata and their construction team and their engineering team, figuring out, where can we make these dependencies? How are things tied together within their design details? We can say, hey, these splice cases are dependent on this specific fiber coming to this specific point and being completed. If that criteria is not met, then we don't allow, or not that we don't allow, the splice cases aren't available for release, and unless someone makes the conscious decision to say, hey, I'm going to break this dependency and give it to a crew. So we build in some workflow management for the crews to try and make it as seamless as possible to, keep guys on work that's ready for them to be worked, and make it, visible and easy, for guys like Shad who, overseeing a project, or, construction managers who are working the project to see, all right, this stuff is starting to complete. This stuff is ready to start going to a crew. It's going out to the crew as this completes, this stuff that they couldn't work before, now they can work. And you can really kind of look ahead of your project and make sure that guys are staying productive, which, as a former contractor, that's great too, because one thing you can never get back is time, and how those crews spend their time. As someone running crews or owning crews or whatever, that makes a huge deal, because maybe you can get 2 or 3 more tasks done in a day than you normally would, because it's laid out in an efficient and kind of logical manner. So your guys are really maximizing that time in the field. So sorry, it gets me excited with that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, and Chad, that brings me back to something you've said in our discussions, that so you don't have crews sitting around waiting for work, because when you look at Render and you see what's yellow, you see what's releasable, what's ready to go, nothing's holding that up. Now that sounds all well and good, but I'm sure buy-in isn't always 100% day one. Oh yes, let's thank you for taking away my paper and handing me a tablet. How has that worked for you, and how do you kind of deal with that part of the challenge?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, contractors they work with a bunch of different clients and have different expectations on different projects, and again, we go back to kind of the partners and having people with like-minded vision, right? It's going to be hard to work with someone who absolutely says, I'm not working in this software.
Sure.
You can't really work in a world with a project like this where you're giving paper prints to one contractor and electronic format to another contractor, right? That just doesn't work from a workflow perspective, from a visibility and reporting aspect of, all those sorts of tools in your tool bag. That just complicates issues more. So first thing is to have conversations with contractors on, and there's also training and things involved with that, but just initial conversations. Hey, this is what we're going to be using. Strata, actually, with our contractors, we have it in our contracts that they will utilize the system. We don't give them the option for paper prints because I really can't imagine the mess that would be created with having one contractor with paper prints and one with having to utilize the electronic system. I just can't imagine
Sure.
that.
Yeah. Well, it kind of immediately throws into question any reports that you're pulling. Oh, this is a great report, great details, except for it doesn't have this, this, and this because it's on paper and that still needs to be processed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Efficiency, right, is you can't have dual systems if you're going to be efficient.
That's right. Right. Yeah. And that's, allowed you also to manage multiple contractors on the same job side by side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You talk about size, scale of project and how many contractors are on board and how many crews are on board, right? It's if you got multiple contractors, many crews on a project this size, then that visibility of what everybody's doing real time is valuable, very valuable.
Yep. And Joey, in your role, you're working, not only training up and working with the Strata Networks team themselves, but also working with their contractors. So what have you seen in terms of adoption of this kind of digital flow?
Yeah, so they've actually brought in some pretty good contractors as far as being open-minded, and I think they've been really, they can see, the value of having this kind of system in place. It's tough, for some of these guys, especially the guys that have been, working at a high level for, decade or 2 decades. These guys know what they're doing. They're sharp, they're capable, and they've been doing it, at a high level in a certain way for a long time. So it's hard to come in and say, hey, the way you've been doing it, we're going to change it all. We're not really changing it all. We're just going to change this one place. But it feels like we're changing everything because, that paper is, has been a big part of their life for a while. But once you show them like, hey, I'm going to get that paper out of your hands. It's not sliding around on your, the dash of your truck, not getting left on the, the side of the road and never be seen again. You'll be able to put in your information, sync it to the cloud, and then it's out of your hands. You're done with it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to go, if you're working way out on the end of the project, you don't have to drive all the way back, to the shop or to the office or the warehouse to turn in your red lines and then drive back to your hotel room, near where you're working. You can sync it and be done with it. And, the crews, some crews get this and some don't, but generally the managers and the hires up too see the, the benefits of having this kind of digital trail of the work when it's completed, when it's given to Strata, when Strata approves it. This is, again, from a former contractor, you can really manage your WIP. Hey, what work have I completed? What has not been paid for? Which happens on every project. Sometimes, there may be an issue with, quality, or maybe you got it to a certain area, but you couldn't complete something because there was a problem, and so you can't build that area yet. But Render allows you to have full visibility. You can see the work you've done. You can see that it's sitting and waiting to be approved, or you can see that it's been approved, and that really lets you kind of manage your invoicing cycle and your WIP cycle and keep that down and really stay on top of your finances as a contractor, which when these guys kind of see that really puts a light bulb on for the guys higher up. The guy that's putting in the duct may not care too much about that, but it's still getting that extra task out of his hand, and it also removes another opportunity for error to creep in the system when you're turning paper in, and it's coming out of the foreman's hand and it's going into construction manager's hand. He's got to decipher the handwriting. He's got to see, all right, did he transpose this number here? Is that the correct handhold number, or did they put this in the right spot? Then he reviews it. Then it's got to go to somebody else. Then it's got to go to somebody else. It's been through 4 people's hands, and you're wondering if you're playing a game of telephone with the data. So when the crews really kind of cotton on to that, you see, there's less trepidation, more, hey, this is great. I'm happy that we have it. And, kind of outside the Strata, environment, I talk to contractors who are on projects that don't have Render, and like, man, I wish we had Render. We're running into all these problems where data's not matching and, we don't quite agree with the phone company on what's happened. If we had render, there'd be no question. We'd all be on the same page, and our life would be a lot easier. So,
right.
That's a long way around to answering your question, but Strata has partnered with some really good guys who've been open-minded, and I think they're seeing the benefit of that.
Well, and I think when we initially, pitched this idea and talked about these ideas, there's some nervousness, right?
Sure.
And we understand that there's a learning curve for them and for us, right? It's not bulletproof by any means, but I think the vision's important. And understand that, we're going to work with you to fine-tune this process a little bit and the tasks and what's required in the tasks and things of that nature. And so I think if there's that willingness, there's more open-mindedness from the contractor.
Right.
Yeah, I really, to echo that, Strata has been great. The guys I work with over there about, listening to the contractors and, being flexible and adjusting, how render's set up and what's, what they're capturing, how they're capturing, when they're capturing certain pieces of information, based off of feedback from the field, which is great. I forget who said it, but no plan survives contact with the enemy. It's like any project. Everybody has great ideas till you get hit the ground running, and then you run into rock or you run into utilities you didn't see in front of you. And it's the same way with using this kind of software. But you adapt, and Strata's adapting with their contractors, within Render to make sure they're getting exactly what they need, but not wasting extra time and energy on stuff that is not important or useful.
Yeah, and you mentioned adapting, and let's talk about that and how the visibility that's provided here allows you to adapt, to make decisions. So focusing on using data to kind of guide what you're doing next, where you're working, how you're working. Shad, can you talk a little bit about what that provides for you?
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. So this project contains a lot of existing conduit the city owns, and we're trying to utilize for the project. And this conduit has been put in the ground for the last 20 years. So, and anybody that's worked with old conduit, sometimes you really don't know what you get. Mm-hmm. And so when we're building areas, the contractors will go in and try to find and proof this conduit, and records don't match, things are different than what we thought, and things of that nature. So there's, in the construction world, it's all about what to do with changes. And yep. So like with this existing conduit, what does the contractor do when he finds discrepancies in the design that are different than what's put in render and what they're asked to do? And it's obviously there's different levels of changes that are required. Some the inspectors can go out and work with the foreman and make some quick decisions and get it resolved. And then there's others that require conversations with the design team, or sometimes even revised documentation to show what those updates need to happen to make it work right. So that's obviously one of the challenges, but we found some of the tools in Render allow us to do that. So contractors can go, instead of using paper prints to submit changes in the field, they can go make markups and things in Render that allow the visibility. And even when they discover those issues in the field, if they have a section of conduit that's just not going to work, they can put that at what's called in jeopardy, meaning that it's got problems, and it spits a task automatically to the inspector saying, you need to go look at this because it's not going to work.
Right.
And it's not, it's not the foreman on the end of the day going, oh yeah, I forgot to call the inspector to let him know we got this problem. obviously there's phone calls and conversations that still happen, but when he goes into the system and says, this is a problem area, it's in jeopardy, that spits that task automatically to the inspector, and then he is notified to go look at it.
Right. Whereas traditionally that, that potentially could just be something that goes overlooked for quite some time, right?
Yeah, again, it's right. Some of those efficiencies we're trying to utilize is the foreman forgetting to call or he goes on vacation for a couple of days, forgets to call the inspector, and so that, problem areas sits around for a week or so.
That's right. Yeah. And that's, and going back to that one slide Joey was talking to with the different colors representing the different life cycles, those flagged kind of items really stand out like a sore thumb. There's a red line on the map. Hey, why is that red? It's I often say it's really hard to overlook any one thing or leave any stone unturned when it comes to a job like this, when you've essentially digitally scoped out the work from start to finish. Anything that hasn't turned black or purple by the end, really stands out.
Well, and not only, it doesn't just stand out to that one person, right? So that's visible to everybody. It's visible to the project manager. It's visible to the construction manager. It's visible to the foreman who submitted it. Everybody can see, and you can see the whole entire project, all the little red lines or areas of problems or concerns that have to be addressed.
Yeah, and so, with that, Joey, maybe tell us a little bit about, how that works from a blueprinting standpoint, going into that specific scenario of, dealing with existing duct, how might that figure into these plans where we're adding new fiber networks, and how does that relate?
Sure. So, Strata, because they have good data in their designs that they give over to us, when we ingest that design and blueprint it, we can see within the data where we're expecting there to be existing duct. We can say, hey, this is existing duct. We can give different instructions to the crews and make sure that they know, hey, you're coming in here looking for existing duct. You're not looking to place new duct. You need to proof it. You need to check it for continuity before you do anything. So it kind of, it instigates that, hey, QC check on the existing duct first thing, to find those issues that Shad mentioned. If everything works great, then, QC it, then you place the fiber, do whatever you need to do at that spot. If there's an issue, again, like Shad said, depending on the scope, you can go through the change process, or you can, kick it up the line to let somebody else handle it. But we take the information that's provided, and because we're able to go in there and see exactly what's going on in the design, we can say, hey, crew, this is existing duct, here's what you need to do. Or, here's an existing handhole. You're not coming in to set a bigger handhole. You're coming to check an existing handhole, make sure it's up to specs. If it's not up to specs, the crew knows, how to work that handhole to make sure that it's, nice and pretty before they leave the site, and they can document all of that as well within their forms.
Right. Yeah, and Chad, is change management maybe the biggest efficiency killer potentially when it comes to working with contractors?
That's a good one for sure. It's a good one, right?
Yeah.
Because I've been on plenty of jobs where the contractor completely shuts down when there's a small problem, right?
Right.
He says, I'm done. I got to stop.
Right.
And so that's a time killer.
Yeah. And speaking to that scenario, if they do happen to run into a problem that's not an immediate solve, are you able to today to be able to utilize that workforce, flexibly and reallocate as needed?
Yeah. So if there's a change that comes up and stops construction work, right, or they're getting close to the end of an area, they've got work to complete to get it knocked out and checked off. They can look at the other stuff, and we can start them on something else and get whatever needed to come change and adjust.
Nice.
And it's really good from efficiency as far as, when that's submitted to the inspector, and then if that change needs to come back to the design team, we try to get those resolved within about a week. Sometimes we do have to send them back because the city's the owner. Sometimes there are changes that require, digging in roads or whatever that we have to go get kind of reapproval from the city.
Yep.
So, but we like to get that on their plate as soon as possible. So that change is not hanging out forever.
Right. Makes sense. Well, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. And after last weekend, I should probably stay away from pudding for the most part. But let's talk about some of the results that you've seen thus far in this Lehigh project. So tell us about, really that first stat we're seeing on the screen there. It's kind of a big one.
Yeah, I mean, everybody likes a project, right, under budget and in schedule. So and the project is definitely, on that train track. We're on schedule right now and moving along. So
Right.
we've got about, it's set to be complete in 2025, but we like where we're at with the progress.
That's great. Good deal. Yeah. On track is always great. Maybe we can improve on that even, but yeah. And then the middle one, 1 to 2 days, customers sign up to work being allocated. Let's talk a little bit about how the solution is working for you there.
Yeah, so we haven't really touched on this, but the sign-up process, so Strata has a development team who built a sign-up portal for customers and ISPs to go sign up to get service. So once an area construction-wise is built, then they're notified that they can go sign up for service. So, and they sign up for service in the portal, and then that information is then exported out on a daily basis, and then we ingest it next day into Render. And what that does is it provides a one-day step from when they sign up to when that address or customer is then kind of sent to the service drop and installation crew that here's this customer ready to be installed. And
Right.
so there's really no lag time. And honestly, and one of the things we're looking to do right now, it takes a person to go drop that information from the portal into Render. We're looking to automate that, and that's set to be complete probably by the end of the year, where it's an automatic API and webhook dump
Yep.
from the portal into Render. So it's automatic every day that the crews are notified who's ready for service and to go get the work done.
Right. Yeah. That's utilizing Render's updated API capabilities. That's great. Let's talk about the next one, because it really can, maybe it actually kind of connects too. I mean, getting as-built into your downstream fiber management system with, in under a month. Obviously accurate data plays a role in service delivery too, ultimately knowing exactly when, an MST that's serving a location is ready. And, if you've got assigned ports where that information lies, rather than having to play detective is kind of key. Let's talk about how those as-builts are working for you and how those initiate in Render and all that.
Yeah, no more paper prints. Right? We're not trying to get somebody's red lines off the dashboard of their pickup truck
Yeah.
to get them inputted. So it's really about the whole system when we talk about this. So our beginning design is all GIS based. So the design team puts together really good GIS based designs that are then, as you say, ingested or blueprinted into Render. Well, that same information is then, with notes and whatever adjustments by the field crews to create red lines, so to speak. I don't know if they're marked red, but red lines, so to speak. and then after those areas of the project are complete, that information is exported into a GIS type format where it can be then directly brought into our records management system. So there's no person having to interpolate paper print red lines and redraw it into a record system that flows in. It's not perfect. There are adjustments, right, that have to be made, but
Sure.
the bulk of the information is there. So it's really making some adjustments to it, validating all the information, and then it's go. So the actual time to take an area that's been built, to get all the information put into the records management system is really less than a week. But we're committed to the city that once we get an area complete construction, that we'll have that done in a month.
That's great. Yeah, and I know other in other instances where render's involved, we're utilizing APIs to constantly hand that information over, and it's really just a personal preference whether you want to kind of play with the data first and review it before it gets integrated back. That's great. Thanks for that, Shad. With that, and I think we're getting close to the time, Joe, I might bring you back for a little bit of Q&A.
Yes. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. It's pretty amazing what's possible with software and technology these days. It's hard to imagine going back to the old way, I'm sure. Let's jump right into the questions. If anybody out there has more questions to submit, go right ahead. Just type your question right in the question window on the side of your screen and hit submit button. Okay. So how does licensing for Render work for contractors? What are the costs of using it?
All right. Yeah. And I might hand that kind of licensing and how you're working with contractors on that over to Shad.
Yeah. So how we do it is Strata pays the licensing fee. So there's no cost put on to the contractor as far as the licensing and render. Strata pays, has a monthly subscription type fee to cover the expenses, but it covers all the licenses. So Strata's in-house licenses, we give a viewer license to the city so they can view the project just as live as anybody else and pull reports just as well as anybody else.
That's great. And then what, if anything, is the contractor responsible for, Shad?
Yeah, so what we make the contractor be responsible for is the iPad that they, download the app and utilize to use. So it's a matter of liability on that part, right? Is we don't want to be liable for their iPads. And we when we had discussions with our contractors, we kind of gave them a recommendation on how many to have per foreman or per crews, so they don't go out and buy 100 iPads.
Yeah. And just full disclosure there too, where we've recently rolled out an app for phones as well, iPhones, and we'll have Android capability across tablets and phones here in the near future, real soon, actually.
Excellent. Here's a good one. What applications are integrated with Render?
All right. Yeah. I'll hand that off to you, Joey. Talk a little bit about our integration capability.
Yeah. So Render's got an API, so a read API and a write API. So we really have the capability for you to pull pretty much any data from your project out to incorporate into, maybe Power BI or, a Tableau or anything like, if you want to visualize it in a certain way or bring it into Site Tracker or something like that to update, downstream, project management software, or counting or anything like that. If you're keeping up with, milestones, so, very easy to set that up. We've also got, read APIs. So in some situations, we have customers that are working with fiber management software where they can put something in on that end, and it triggers through some of their custom integration they built on their end that will trigger new tasks and stuff to go into render on our end. So work is only being done once, and has kind of a cascade effect throughout the system. So it's something that's evolving. We've got a pretty good solution right now, but we're working to make it better. But so read write, we can pretty much work with whomever.
Yeah, and just to add to that, obviously, with every task in render, it can be mapped to multiple labor codes, labor units, material units as well. So we can tell you, how much of what widget was used by whom, where, and when. And so obviously all that data being available via our API to share with ERPs and the other systems like that, and bringing down, some of those 2021 material wastage issues and utilization issues that Chad mentioned earlier. Obviously being able to really track, what goes where is key there.
All right. So how much work/time is required in the project configuration?
Yeah. So, maybe I'll take that and maybe hand off to Joey to keep me honest, since he's actually doing that kind of work these days. But generally, we start off with, asking a number of questions about standard workflows. We usually start with at least a sample design from one of our customers so that we can look and see, what we're able to utilize, what we're able to determine from that design. So as we create task types based off of our customers' workflows. That process, once we have an initial design, we'll take about a week, and then usually do a few days on site to really discuss workflows, to discuss downstream data needs so that we configure the platform specifically for our customers' usage, taking the burden of that configuration largely off of them. That process of kind of initial on-site plus some follow-up questions, that's about another week. And then really it's a few weeks to, maybe 4 to 5 weeks past that to work with the data and initially get those initial designs blueprinted so that we can turn that over in a testing environment and train off of that. So it really just is determined largely by the complexity of the designs, the scenarios, and how much those processes are kind of in flux or already known in terms of general construction workflows.
Yeah, I think Tom nailed it, and once you have that project configuration up and going, things compress quite a bit, when there's no changes and we're ingesting, like for like information, turnaround's pretty quick. Like any project, some configurations may change, but those, turn around pretty quick as well.
Great.
Awesome. Let's see, I got a question. Maybe this is for you, Shad. Have you seen any changes over the last 5 years or trends that are happening now in the OSP world or construction that would necessitate even more so this type of software?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about, when you talk about the size of project, because everybody's building fiber, right? That's the buzzword, and just the amount of construction and work that's going on. I would say just the amount of work and the issues with labor and things like that, it certainly helps to have a system like this, right? I mean, we're still the rural telecom in Northeast Utah. We still do little tiny small projects where I'll probably be issuing out paper prints. But if someone's looking to do a larger scale like this, yeah, it's definitely worth its weight in gold.
Excellent. Anything else you guys want to say that maybe you forgot to bring up in the presentation?
Yeah, maybe just point out, I think, Joe, you referenced where folks can download some of our white papers here, the field utilization guide. You could also reach out to team@rendernetworks.com for your copy of that. Beyond that, if you want to get in touch with us because you like what you heard or you have more questions, feel free to hit us up on our website, rendernetworks.com, or team@rendernetworks.com for email. And we'll be glad to have a conversation.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you, Tom, Joey, Shad. This was fantastic. I certainly learned a lot.